Yo! Welcome to Seedborn Brews. I'm Derek, and today is going to be the very first deck tech on this channel. And this deck is my personal favorite. It is Vial Smasher the Fierce and Thrasios Triton Hero. So obviously these are two partner commanders, and I feel like they go together phenomenally well. A lot of the deck is mainly focused on Vial Smasher the Fierce. That's kind of going to be what we focus everything towards. That's what everything's going to be geared towards. But Thrasios pairs very well. A lot of the partner decks I've seen with Vial Smasher tend to use Kydel, I see. Maybe because they were in the same precon together, they tend to get pushed together. But I took inspiration from Josh Lee Kwai of the Command Zone and realized Thrasios just pairs so well with Vial Smasher because of the just inherent mana sink ability of the card. You can literally, no matter how much you ramp, which this deck wants to do, you have a mana sink in the command zone at any time that's going to let you further ramp or draw cards, which is amazing. So, the key to Vial Smasher, well, there are really two keys. One, it mentions whenever you cast your first spell each turn, meaning each turn, you don't want to be casting a ton of spells each turn. You'd rather be casting one big spell, preferably on each person's turn, hence the each turn, and you could just get a trigger everybody's turn, and basically, if it's a 4-player game, you want to get 4 per round at the table. Ideally, that would be great. The other part is the cast, and the cast, the reason that is important, is because even if you put all your mana in a big spell, and it gets countered, it still was cast, so you still get to deal damage, which is super helpful because it makes you less fearful of just inputting huge amounts of mana into a big spell. Because even if it's countered, you still get some type of positive effect for it. And my favorite part of the card is the randomness that's going to deal this damage to an opponent at random. It's great. You can just make all types of excuses. You can be like, oh, don't target me because, I didn't do it. The dice did. It's great. It's perfect. So before I really get into what makes the deck go, just a few things up front. One, I'm not going to get into all the specifics of this deck. It's obviously going to have some card draw and board wipes and targeted removal, all the things that make a deck go. What I'm going to focus on today is kind of what gets you to where you want to go to win, or if you're not winning, just to have fun and cause chaos. Basically, all the specifics of what I have in this deck that I think are the most exciting. If you want to see all aspects of the deck, all the different cards, I have the full deck list in the description on Tapped Out, and you can see everything about it. This is kind of just a quick, to the point of what I feel like makes this deck kind of unique and cool. So, without further ado, the two most important cards in this deck, and really what makes this deck function to the best of its capacity, are Vedalken Orrery and Leyline of Anticipation. Very similar cards, almost the same, obviously, other than Leyline's opening hand effect. These cards, essentially, they just let you play all your cards at instant speed. So, this deck already has 25 instants and sorceries in it, and naturally has a lot of possibilities for you to play cards at instant speed on other people's turns, but this takes it to the next level. This lets you cast anything at any time. There's a whole bunch of, I don't need to go on about how good these cards can be in Commander. Just being able to take your turn when you want to take it is a huge advantage. But to this deck specifically, it lets you cast whatever cards you want, whenever you want, picking and choosing when Vial Smasher is going to trigger to deal out that damage that you want to deal. So kind of along the same lines of getting to cast stuff on whenever you want on other people's turns, instead of casting stuff on other people's turns, why not just take more of your own turns? Makes it even better. So not only do you get the extra cast and everything, you get a whole extra turn. Why not? It's fun. So, Time Stretch. Great extra turn card. It's a 10 CMC spell. You get 2 extra turns out of it. Why not? It's a very, very solid card. Expropriate is another extra turn spell. My favorite of the extra turn spells. It is just a ridiculous card. Everyone at the table gets to vote time or money. Everyone who votes money, you get to steal one of their permanents every time. Somebody votes time, you get an extra turn. You also get to vote, so you automatically get an extra turn. And then everybody goes around. And for whatever reason, despite the fact that taking 2 to 3 extra turns basically guarantees you win the game if you're in any type of board state, people tend to be really generous about giving away extra turns, which I don't understand, but I'll take it. I'm not going to argue with it. And then my last extra turn effect in this deck is Nexus of Fate. It's a relatively new card. Obviously, there was that whole kind of controversy with it being a buy a box promo, but card's super strong, and the fact that it goes back in your library is amazing, especially in this deck where while we actually run a very low number of card draw spells relative to a lot of other decks I make, the fact that you have a card draw mana sink in the command zone means sometimes when you overramp, you're just going to end up drawing way too many cards and drawing through your deck real fast. So it's nice to have a card that can get shuffled back in so you don't have a situation where you either deck yourself or you kind of run out of stuff to do. So through extra turn effects and instant speed shenanigans, we should be able to get tons of Vial Smasher triggers, and she should just be throwing vials left and right, blowing stuff up. It should be fun. So this next category is how I kind of built the deck and how I kind of got the inspiration behind the deck. So before I kind of put all this together, my first thought was I really wanted to build a Lands Matter deck. Now, by no means is this a Lands Matter deck, but it got me thinking about how powerful lands are. For whatever reason, mass land destruction is super frowned upon, and people tend, maybe they run a strip mine, maybe they're running a wasteland, something like. People tend not to run much land removal. So if you get out a powerful land that's going to be game changing, unlike any other card type, people have a tough time dealing with it. And if you have multiple lands that are breaking the game for you, odds are people aren't going to be able to get rid of all of them. They're probably going to stick around. And in a deck like this, where you kind of want to just lay low and keep your stuff and build a board state, they are perfect. So game-breaking lands are, I feel like, what really makes this deck go. But for this to work, you want to be able to pick and choose which lands you get when you get them. So effectively, we use a lot of land tutors. Cards like Expedition Map is a good example, where it's a cheap artifact. You can play it, search for any lands you want for any specific situation. Cards like Hour of Promise. You can search for any 2 lands, that card is just ridiculous. 2 lands and put them onto the battlefield. It's insane. Tempt with Discovery along the same lines. People tend to get tempted a lot, meaning you're going to get, if you get 4 of any land onto the battlefield, especially in a deck like this, that could mean game over. That is insanely powerful. So those are the only ones we'll run. We also run, it's not really tutoring for lands, but I love ramp cards because there's a lot of ramp. There's 18 ramp spells in this deck. But I personally love ramp cards that search for basic land types instead of basic lands. So things like Nature's Lore or Sky Shroud Claim are great because, yeah, it's looking for a forest, but that allows you to get any type of dual land you want to get mana fixed early and whenever you need it. So that way you don't end up, especially in a 4-color deck like this, you want to have your colors ready to go when you need them. You don't want to be stuck behind because you don't have the colors you need. Now, I think the best land tutor in this deck by far is Crop Rotation. This card is ridiculous, and the biggest, most important part of this is its instant speed. That is huge, because the fact that it's instant speed, obviously, other than going along with the theme of the deck, is you can get a land into play at instant speed, which is something otherwise you don't really have a chance to do. Now, there's only a few situations where this comes up, but these situations are crucial. You can Crop Rotation into Bojuka Bog if you want to exile a graveyard, or, I feel like the best use of it, Crop Rotation in a Glacial Chasm, which literally, if there's a big combat step and you're about to take a bunch of damage, just Crop Rotation, bring in a Glacial Chasm, all of a sudden, you can't take damage anymore. That's insane to be able to do that at instant speed. Now, speaking of these lands, I'm going to get into some of these lands that you actually want to be tutoring for. What's going to make this deck go? Now, I just mentioned Glacial Chasm. This card is super broken, super strong. Now, when you read it, it's almost like you start reading all these downsides, and it's like, why do I want to play this? And you get to that little good part at the end. So when it enters the battlefield, you got to sacrifice a land. Every upkeep is a cumulative upkeep of 2 life, and your creatures can't attack. All that sounds awful until you realize you can't take damage. And in a deck like this where you don't want to be attacking, that's not even a downside. And in a commander with 40 life, a cumulative upkeep of 2 life really isn't that bad, considering if you're immune from damage for even 4 turns, no matter how much damage you take, you're in a position where you're probably going to end up winning that game. It's a super powerful card, one of my favorites. That's something you might be tutoring for. Now, there's other ones. This is another just ridiculous and fun card, Dark Depths. This card is super powerful in the right deck. In this deck, we'll be producing so much mana. 1, it's a mana sink. It's great to have that. 2, you want to be able to have a long-term payoff for sinking some of this mana. It's great to have, big spells to sink it into, but there are going to be turns where you do enough, and you might end up with just 3 extra mana here, 6 extra mana there. Dumping it off into there to Dark Depths to possibly end up with a 20/20 Indestructible Merit Lodge. It's all worth it. It's great. Now there's a couple more lands that really make this deck go. These next two are super common. Everybody probably has heard of them, knows about them, knows of their reputation. It's Urborg and Cabal Coffers. Urborg and Cabal Coffers are one of the most, at least from what I've seen, the most common combinations in EDH. Basically any, 1, 2, 3 color deck that has black is going to want these. Now I realize in a 4-color deck you might be kind of thinking like, why run Cabal Coffers? If you don't have an Urborg out, it's useless. I think I had 2 swamps in this deck. The thing is, with all the land tutoring we have, we're going to be able to get Urborg out pretty consistently. I would honestly say when I play this deck, almost every game, I'm able to get Urborg out. It's not something you struggle for. There's so much ramp that you have a good shot at getting it out. Now these cards together, you just basically just start printing mana on your own. You can make as much mana as you want when you want. It's crazy. Now, along the lines, this Cabal Coffers, there's more that makes it broken. This land is not even a legendary land. This is a normal land somehow, meaning you can have as many copies of Cabal Coffers as you want, which seems ridiculous. Now, along those lines, we run a card called Vesuva that enters the battlefield as a copy of any land, meaning this can literally just straight up be a second Cabal Coffers. Now, Vesuva is a great utility land. It can be if you want a second Pajuka Bog to exile a graveyard. If you need graveyard hate, you have it. If you need basically any land fixing, if you need color fixing, and for whatever reason you only have one of a certain color, Vesuva is there. It's a really good utility land to kind of get what you need when you need. So there's just a couple more lands I'm going to talk about. This next one, Maze of Ith. Super crucial in the deck. It's a very powerful card. We're not always going to have a lot of creatures out. Probably won't have many out at all. And this is why we want cards like Maze of Ith and Glacial Chasm to just not allow people to attack us and just take us out of the game before we can really get our stuff going. It's a super powerful card. This last one I try to put in every deck if I can, and it's Homeward Path. This is a deck that really does want its commander out at all times, and if someone steals your Vial Smasher, which I've had it done too many times to me, it makes you feel bad. You want to be able to do all this stuff with the Vial Smasher triggers, and you have all these plans, and when it's stolen and you really can't get it back, it's just not fun. So having a Homeward Path, just ready, tap it, get all your stuff back. It's just super useful. It's a nice utility land to have. Now, along the same lines as these lands, there's one card that's not only going to combo well with this, but it's going to combo well later. This is one of the all-stars of the deck, and it's kind of in this category, but I'm going to mention it again later, talking about this is just an insanely powerful card, and that is Mirage Mirror. It's from Hour of Devastation. This card is ridiculous. So it's a 3-drop artifact that lets you pay 2 to make it a copy of any land, artifact, enchantment, or creature. The fact that it includes land on there just blows my mind. That's insane. One is great protection, because if someone's trying to destroy, whether you make it a creature, an artifact, enchantment, there's a lot of removal for that. You can just pay 2 if it's still a Mirage Mirror, make it a land, and it escapes board wipes. It's great. In this deck, for 2 mana, you can make it another Cabal Coffers. Just ridiculous. Between that and Vesuva, you can literally have 3 Cabal Coffers out at a time. And again, you're making more mana than you're going to know what to do with. And with all the mana sinks, it's exactly where we want to be. So, the last card I'm going to mention in this land category is not a land, but it's crucial in any land strategy, and it's Crucible of Worlds. This card is great. Artifact lets you play lands from your graveyard, which, again, if people are trying to destroy your lands, even if they manage to, you have this card in your deck to let you bring them back and keep the engine going so you don't lose those lands. And yeah, it's important. Best part is it's recently been reprinted, so it's still way too expensive, but much less expensive than it used to be. So that's great. Perfect. So this next category kind of jumps off the back of the one we just talked about, which was the lands. I realize it's a handful of lands. You can't build your whole deck on the idea that you're going to have Urborg Cabal Coffers and a copy of Cabal Coffers out all at the same time. Realize it's unrealistic. The guys over at Commander's Brew, I've heard them talk about it as the magical Christmas land sometimes, where you have all these perfect pieces out and it's exactly what you want. I realize it's not realistic. Now, you shoot for it, but you need to have a more consistent strategy that's going to get you through the game if you don't get that. And that's why, as I mentioned before, we have 18 ramp spells in this deck. You're going to have tons of ramps. So the best thing about this is, if you get these cards you want, if you get the Urborg, you get Cabal Coffers, you get everything perfect, then you have hundreds of mana to have fun with, which is what we want. If not, getting to 20, 25 mana just straight off of ramping and normal shenanigans is super, super consistent. I'm not going to talk about all the ramp spells. You have the Explosive Vegetation, you have Cultivate, you have mentioned Nature's Lore before. You have all the basic ramp spells that you want in a deck, and ramp creatures, and there's just ramp everywhere. But I'm going to mention 3 specific cards that ramp super hard and that kind of fit into that category of you get these kind of cards out in combination, you're in a spot to win. The first one is Mana Reflection. This card is ridiculous. The wording on this is just insane. It's one of the few actual mana doublers. Now, it literally doubles the mana produced by any source. Now, most mana doublers only add an additional quote-unquote mana doubler. Zendikar, Resurgent, Vorinclex. There's a whole bunch of cards that kind of fit into that category, and they only add an additional. This literally doubles, meaning if you have our next card, Doubling Cube out, that will produce twice as much mana too. Now, both of these cards effectively act as mana doublers, and the reason why they're so great is, again, even if you don't have your Cough Reserve Board combo out, you could just have a bunch of lands. These are going to bring you to that next level. The best thing about these two is the card I mentioned before, Mirage Mirror, again, functions so well with them because for 2 mana, you can make it a copy of either one of these, and basically you get doubles and doubles, and it just keeps going. Like, you end up with, what is that? I don't like math.
2 hours later.
Is that cubing? No.
1 eternity later.
I don't know. But either way, this card is just insane. You get a copy of any of these cards, and somehow, thankfully, none of them are legendary. And you can just make mana on mana on mana, and you just, again, you don't know what to do with it all. You know what we do with it all? That's what this next category is for. I'm going to tell you what to do with it all. So this is what we're going to do with all that mana. Thrasios is in your command zone. At any point, you can draw as many cards as you want if you have too much mana, because you can just keep activating and ramping harder and drawing more cards. And that's literally the baseline level for this deck if you have too much mana. Thrasios just sitting there. But of course, we want to shoot for more, strive for more. And that's where all these come in. Now, X spells are a great way to take advantage of Vial Smasher. Quick rules thing, because I've heard a lot of confusion with people on this. With X spells, so if you're going to like tutor for an X spell, for example, if you are going to cast an X spell off the top of your library without paying its mana cost, off of a Mind's Dilation, something like that, or an Tally trigger, if you do it like that, the CMC is X is 0 automatically. So if you're going to tutor for a card like Vial-ainous Wealth, the first X spell we'll talk about, then its CMC is only 3. But when you actually cast it from your hand, the total CMC is actually whatever you paid to cast it. So if you spend 20 mana on a Vial-ainous Wealth and the X is 17, the CMC is actually 20. So your Vial Smasher is going to trigger for 20, which is amazing. And like I mentioned before, because it's on cast, a danger of casting giant X spells and tapping out is the potential of a counter. But because that damage trigger is going to happen anyway, you can sleep a little bit, rest easier. You're going to actually do something with it. It's not just all going to go to waste. So bueno. Now, Vial-ainous Wealth is the first one I mentioned. This card is amazing. If you have enough mana, which, again, it's not that hard to do, you can just mill somebody out. I think the biggest I've ever cast it for was 110, and that was before I had Mana Reflection in the deck. So it's very realistic to get much higher than that. And it's great. If you want to cast it, and the thing is, the utility of Vial-ainous Wealth, I feel like is so underrated. You can only have 10 mana, which in this deck is nothing. If you just have 10, you cast it X is 7, you can get some real strong cards off the top of somebody's deck and play them to get yourself in a good situation if you need it. Or endgame, if you have all your pieces set up, you can just straight up mill somebody out or just play most of their deck out and just throw it all on the table. It's a great feeling when you just get to look through somebody's deck and play all the cards you want. Super fun. Vial-ainous Wealth, probably my favorite X spell. It's great in this deck. Another great X spell is Pull from Tomorrow. This card is great. There's a lot of cards similar to it where depending on they have target player draw cards or vice versa. This card is 2 blue and X, and you just draw X cards and discard a card. That's amazing. This is great. So another X spell, no surprises here. It's Exsanguinate, super popular card. It is 2 black and X, and each opponent is going to lose whatever that X life is, and you're going to gain life equal to life lost this way. So anytime a card has that wording where it says equal to something done this way and it's affecting every player, you know it wasn't designed for multiplayer, or if it was, they didn't care how broken it was. Either way, I'm not going to argue with it. I'm happy about it because it helps me. Bueno. Now, this card is insane for a number of reasons. Probably my favorite thing about it is I kind of hold on to it sometimes, and if I ever kind of get down to that dangerously low life total, it just lets you, I mean, you don't even have to cast it for much. If you cast it where X is 5, you just easily gain 15 life if you're playing in a 4-player game, and that is amazing. It's just a super powerful card, great in any ramp deck. So the last X spell in this category is a card that I think is super powerful. Really don't ever see it played. Kind of understand why, but in this deck it is literally perfect, and it's Mind Swipe. It's blue, red, and X, and it counters a target spell unless its controller pays X, and then it deals X damage to that player. And this deck, it's insane, because the thing is, a lot of times we want to leave mana open. With all these mana sinks we have, whether we have a Dark Depths up, whether we have a Thrasios out, whether we have Vial-ainous, we can just play things at instant speed. Whatever the thing is, we usually want to wait to cast a lot of our spells till the end of the turn before ours anyway. So a lot of time, if possible, we want to leave mana open and use it strategically throughout everyone else's turns. Now, with a card like this, it's perfect for leaving mana open, because you literally wait till the turn before the end of yours, and the last spell someone's going to cast, you just tap out and cast this. And not only are you getting a giant Vial Smasher trigger, but it's going to deal that X damage to that spell's controller also. This potentially, realistically, can knock 2 people out of the game, just like that. It can be a game ender. It's so powerful, and I feel like it's overlooked, but it is a very strong card, and perfect in this deck. Now, one more card that is an honorable mention for X spells, because it is not an X spell, but it has an X activated ability that I just love, and that is Una, Queen of the Fae. Now, I mentioned before, we don't really have a lot of creatures to block, so at the very least, you use this as a mana sink. You can exile stuff off the top of people's libraries, try to get rid of some win cons, and make a little army of flyers to defend yourself. What this is really for is when you get to that end game, just straight up winning the game. Because it's an activated ability, doesn't need to tap, anything like that. You can use it multiple times. This card will let you mill people out and win the game. It's great. Super fun. I kind of am biased to it because I think the art is super awesome on it, so I found a way to force it in the deck whether it needed to be there or not. But it's a strong card. If you like it, deserves consideration at the very least. Now, I'm going to be doing these last 2 categories for every deck tech I do. This is kind of just a fun part. I realize people want to kind of, make their deck as good as it can be a lot of the time. They want to try to put the ideal card in each slot. This kind of throws that out the window, and it's more of a fun take to it. I'm obviously not building any competitive decks, as you can tell from the cards I'm putting in here, but they tend to be strong casual decks. This kind of will, again, this is just on the casual end, but it's fun. So this first category is literally, no surprise here, is called fun. The fun cards aren't necessarily perfect fits in whatever slot they're in. There's definitely cards that fit better. There's cards that are going to do a better job at what these cards do, but yeah, I like them. It's almost similar to what I just said about Una. I like the art. I'm putting it in. It's kind of how it works. So, without further ado, the fun stuff. Now, the first fun card is Desertion. It is 3 blue for a counter spell, but if you counter an artifact or a creature this way, you get to take control of it. I realize 5 CMC for a counter spell, but most people are like, why would you spend 5 CMC for a counter spell when Pact of Negation or even just counter spell itself are super cheap? Because we want to be spending a lot of mana on other people's turns, so it's just a bigger Vial Smasher trigger. It has a cool effect. The second to last card on this fun list is Primal Amulet. This is a 4 CMC artifact from Ixalan, and it makes all your instant sorceries cost 1 less to cast, which is great because the way I made this deck, it's got 25 instants and sorceries. If you're making an iteration that has more permanents, not going to be great in there. But if you have one that has high instants and sorceries, it's going to be great because it's going to help ramp you, get your stuff out faster. Now, nice thing about this is, that's not all it does. The cool thing about this, the reason it's in the fun category, is it has the potential to flip. Now, each time you cast one of these instants and sorceries, it gets a charge counter. When you get to 4, it flips to Primal Wellspring. Now, Primal Wellspring, super cool card. At its very worst, it's an extra command tower. Taps for any color. That's obviously not why we're running it, though. If you spend this mana to cast an instant or sorcery spell, you get to fork it. Now, normally that's good. Fork my explosive vegetation. Great. In this deck, you start forking some of our giant X spells, and you fork a 20 CMC Villainous Wealth. It could be a game ender, or if you're tapping out and creating some of the insane amounts of mana that you can in this deck, you can just mill out 2 people right there. And it's a land, so you can do this every turn. This card is insane. it's worth considering in any type of sorcery, instant and sorcery deck, but especially in this deck, pretty strong. So this last card in the fun category has the highest variance. Some of the cards I've been putting into this fun category are just cards I love that I want to force into decks. They're actually pretty good cards though. This one, its floor, or carpet, if you will, is really doing nothing, while its ceiling is amazing, and that card is Carpet of Flowers. So, Carpet of Flowers costs 1 green mana for an enchantment, and during your main phase, you add X mana of any one color, where X is the number of islands a target opponent controls. Now, if nobody has an island, this is literally useless. That's why it's fun, because you never know what you're going to get. It's all exciting. It's like that Forrest Gump thing with chocolates. It is exciting. Now, the thing about this is, it's not basic islands. It's any type of island, meaning they could just be running dual lands, and if someone has any type of island subtype on their land, it counts. And really, all you need, if they have 2 islands, it's another Soul Ring for you, except you get colored mana from it. It's actually, I think, a lot more powerful than it seems at first. I've just literally never seen it played, and I kind of really like the concept of possibly just getting some random mana out of nowhere just because someone decided to have some islands. I think that's kind of cool. Yeah, I think if nobody's tried it, you should probably try it. It seems like an exciting card. Now, the very last category is one that's near and dear to my heart. I'm sure if you noticed, if you look at my little logo where it says Seaborn Brews, that O in Seaborn, I didn't just leave an extra line in there. That is a Phyrexian mana symbol. That is because Phyrexia is near and dear to my heart. I love everything Phyrexian. I love all of the blocks related to Phyrexians. I love Phyrexia. It makes me happy. It is great. So, every deck I make, I want to, show you some ways to Phyrexianize to get your deck closer to Phyrexian perfection. Infect is going to be the first thing that you can add to this deck to kind of mix it up. And there's 2 specific cards. There's a lot of Infect cards, obviously. 2 specific ones I feel like fit great in this deck. The number 1 card that I think you should put in if you want to work in Infect is Grafted Exoskeleton. This card is crazy. It gives a creature Infect, and in Vial Smasher's case, she's dealing damage through her effect, meaning she's throwing out Infect. You literally got Infect Vials flying all over the place. Like, what else could you want? You have Infect Vials of Infected Dragon Fire, I think is what they're throwing. I'm not exactly sure. But it's great either way. And it's just so much fun because you cast a 10 CMC spell, which with the X spells and other just natural 10 CMC spells, there's a lot in this deck. You can just knock somebody out of nowhere, and it is so much fun to do. So, Grafted Exoskeleton is great. But there's a secondary effect on this card that makes it even better. And that is when it's unequipped from a permanent, that permanent is sacrificed. That's amazing. The reason this is so good is if someone steals your Vial Smasher with Grafted Exoskeleton, they get control of the Vial Smasher, but her equipment stays equipped onto her, and you get to re-equip it to one of your own creatures the next turn, and it gets sacked, so it goes back to the command zone. They can't keep control of it. It has a kind of that double effect. It's amazing. It's a great card. Second source of Infect is the Big Daddy himself. Probably just my favorite card ever. It is just the most perfect a Magic card can be, and it is Blightsteel Colossus. Blightsteel Colossus is 12 mana for an 11/11 Trample, Infect, Indestructible powerhouse. And with that big old just Phyrexian mana symbol on his chest belly region, it's amazing. Blightsteel is everything you could ever want. And also it has the effect of if it goes to a graveyard, it's shuffled back in, which again in this deck might be useful. So if you want to get some Infect, both these cards match super well in this deck. You should probably throw them in. So that's going to do it for this very first deck tech. Please let me know what you think. Again, check out the full deck list in the description. If y'all have any other commanders you want me to build around or hear my thoughts on, suggest them and I'll get at them. Till next time.